Hey, did you? I believe. Do you? Yes, I do believe. Thank you very much for the wonderful song telling us about the belief. And thank you also, Edna, for the wonderful story of reminding us that we can believe and trust in God to provide even when things don't seem like they should. Therefore, today is a youth day. And being a youth day, I am reminded that I'm a youth. And when I was told about it, I believed it. There is something about believing and doubting. Believing and doubting. And when we talk about believing, we would probably be mentioning something about doubt as well. But before I go into that, let me just go back a bit. Here, talking about, where is it? Appearing and disappearing. Where is that slide? Now, it's maybe me not navigating it very well. Go back again. Yes, that's where we are. So I'm reminded again that I'm a youth and I'm honored. I'm honestly feeling flattered and being very, very privileged to stand before you and talk as a youth. And all the doubts I had about my identity are gone. Because today, I believe I'm a youth. No doubts anymore. Although I would have preferred actually to sit down and listen to another youth speak to me. But today, I will do that. So what is this belief? This sermon today is about a topic that we rarely discuss. It is sermon about doubt. And as such, it's an unfamiliar topic to most people, even though the whole books in the Bible, some of them are dedicated to talk about doubts. The book of Job, the book of Ecclesiastes, Lamentations, Habakkuk, all these people have talked about doubts, questioning God in what they believe. Many Psalms touch on the theme of doubt and feeling abandoned by God. So it is not something that is totally unfamiliar. Certain pastor talking to his youth in church organized a question and answer session where he talked to them and said, you can ask me any question. You know, theological questions, things to do with God. Ask me even personal questions. And so they were there bombarding him with questions. And towards the end of it, one very brave young lady lifted up the hand and said to the pastor, Pastor Lay, when I listen to you speak, you always sound so certain about everything. Do you ever doubt? And he said, that's a very important question. Well, I know when we preach or when we talk to people, I sound very certain. And part of that is very intentional. For one thing, I know, and I know what I believe, and I am not shy about presenting my views in a very forceful manner about what I believe. Because when a man stands up to speak or to preach, he should not be preaching about his doubts, but be preaching about his faith. And People have enough troubles of their own without me adding their burden about doubts in what they're already struggling with. But having said that, that question is important and deserves an answer. And I'm asking you the same question again this morning. Do you ever doubt? Do you got doubts in your life sometimes? I mean, doubts about who you are? Doubt about what you do? Do you doubt about your family? Have you got doubts about your friends? Do you doubt your friends sometimes? Do you doubt what you believe? Do you doubt yourself? So the pastor said, yes, I have doubts. I don't talk about them very much, but I doubt every day. And at the end of the sermon, one of the elders came to him and said, Pastor, did you actually mean what you said? And he said, I really mean it. Absolutely. I mean it. You see, I have doubts and questions that come to me and to my mind every single day. I don't know how a person could be a Christian and not have doubts from time to time. Faith requires some doubts in order to be faith. Just like you can't really appreciate light if you don't know what darkness is. If you ever arrive at a place where all your doubts are gone, know for sure that you have actually arrived in heaven. Because on this planet where we live, doubts are always there with us. And what is doubt? What do you understand by doubt? I looked at the dictionary and I came up with this. It's a feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction. That's what doubt is. Faith and doubt go hand in hand. Life experience has taught me in a very special way, by interacting with people, by observations, and by many other things that I have come across, that you cannot run away from doubt. It's a fact of life. I am a teacher by profession, and sometimes when I teach mathematics, I teach about probability. And probability is about whether and how likely something is happening. And it oscillates between impossibility and certainty on the other end. If something is impossible, then we say it's a zero. No chance of happening. And if it is definitely, certainly going to happen, then it is a 1 or 100%. Anything in between there is the likelihood of it happening. It will be very, very unlikely, very likely, likely, unlikely, very unlikely, very, very unlikely, and so many others in between there. It could even be half and half. 50-50, equally likely, even chances. And our faith and doubts, I compare them with something similar, because it's about certainty. How certain are you about the things that you believe? It ranges between unbelief and faith. On one end is faith, the other end is unbelief. And somewhere in between is where our doubts are. So you see, you can have faith and doubt at the same time. You believe, but you still have some doubts. In between there, you can have a lot of faith and some doubts, or a lot of doubts and some faith. That's how I see it. So we all have that happening to us. And when you look at it in that sense, then you begin realizing that we are not wrong to doubt. I mean, we all doubt from time to time. Doubt itself is not wrong or sinful. It often can be a catalyst for growth, spiritual growth. Our doubts tend to fall into three categories. First one would be what I would call intellectual doubts. These are doubts that are often raised by people, those who are outside the Christian faith and Christian belief. I mean, they talk about things as, is Bible the true word of God? Is Jesus the Son of God? Did God really raise from dead? Did God create this world? Those are intellectual kind of doubts. And people who are not well grounded in faith, in the Word of God, would have those. Then a second category of doubts, I would call them spiritual doubts. These tend to be the doubts of those inside the church. Am I really a Christian? Have I really believed? I mean, why is it so hard for me to pray and sustain a good relationship with God? Why am I still feeling guilty? These are spiritual doubts. And today being Youth Day, I thought I would talk about doubts because this is one thing that young people struggle with. About themselves, but where they're coming from, where they're going, and where they are. And as a teacher, I deal with young people all along the way. And as a parent also of young adults, I have seen this also at home. Doubts about, what am I in the right career? Am I in the right course? Am I doing the right thing? Am I heading the right direction? Is the right person I'm walking along with? All those doubts are in the mind of the young people. And when I say the young people, I mean all of us sitting here. Because we are all young. Then there's a third category of doubts. I'll call them the circumstantial doubts, and this is the largest category because it incorporates all the other two. Comes in all the whys of life. Why did my child die? Why did marriage break? Why can I not find a husband? Why did my friend betray me? Where was God when my uncle was abusing me? All these whys, circumstances. These questions touch on intersection of biblical faith and the pain of the fallen world. Doubt. So as we approach this topic, there are several things I want us to understand right from the beginning. Number one, many people think doubt is the opposite of faith, but it's not. Unbelief is the opposite of faith. Unbelief refers to willful or deliberate refusal to believe. That's unbelief. It's not doubt. Because doubt refers to the inner uncertainties, questioning yourself. That's doubt. The other thing I want you to put into consideration as we talk about doubt is that God doesn't condemn us. He's not even worried about our doubts. When we question him, he's not bothered about that. Both Job and David and many other characters in the Bible repeatedly questioned God. God did not condemn them. See, God is big enough to handle all your doubts and all your questions. It doesn't bother him. In fact, he says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 18, come, let us reason together. Bring your doubts. I know you're doubting. I know what you're going through. Come. I'm open to discussion. Let's talk. So he's not bothered when you don't believe. He says, even when your sins are red as scarlet, red as blood, they shall be white as wool, be white as snow. Shall, not might, not could. He's definite about it. But let's talk about it. Come, let's reason together. The other point I want you to note is that many people think struggling with God means we lack faith. But that's not true either. Struggling with God is a sure sign that we are truly having some faith. If we never struggle, our faith will never grow stronger. But if you're struggling in some things, it's a sure sign that you're on your way to grow your faith. It helped me to think of doubt as kind of an immunization. See, when you receive a smallpox vaccine or some other kind of vaccine, like whichever one you got recently, the doctor gives you a tiny portion of that particular disease. That tiny portion is just enough to activate the antibodies that you have strength to fight the disease when it finally comes. Doubt works kind like that. That you start doubting. And then by doubting, you investigate and you question. And you go and look for more and more evidence. And you continue building your faith. So doubt is like a catalyst to help you build your faith. Doubts can actually end up developing a much stronger faith if we face our doubts honestly, that is. In order to flesh out this principle properly, I want us to look at 3 men in the Bible who doubted. And when they doubted, how did God deal with them? The first one is the father of a boy. The story is recorded in the book of Mark chapter 9. And in that story, Jesus goes up with his disciples. It is during the time of transfiguration. And he comes to some place and he leaves 9 of them down there, and he takes Peter, John, and James with him to go to the mountain. And he is transfigured up in the mountain. But down below the bottom of the mountain, the other 9 disciples are there. And when they're there, this father comes along with his son. And he says, my son has an evil spirit. This spirit has often put my son in the fire or in the water to drown him, to kill him. And I've tried all what I can. Nobody can cure him. Can you do it, please? Well, he had heard about Jesus and his disciples and the miracles they performed. This father had spent all his money going to all the places to get his son cured. But everybody had failed. But he thought, I have a chance here. Maybe the last hope. So he comes in. And the disciples try. And they do their best. But they couldn't. They couldn't do it. So Jesus comes back from the mountain with the other three. And he finds them. And he's asking, where is your faith? And of course the father starts narrating the story. He says, you see, I brought my son to your disciples and they did this and tried whatever magic they could, but they never did anything. My son is still not healed. And then the father proceeds to tell Jesus, if you can, please do something. Notice the word if. If you can. See, that word hangs in the balance of faith and doubt. Faith, because he's telling him, do something. Doubt, because he's saying, if. I'm not sure if you're going to do it. I mean, I've tried everywhere. But if you think you can do something, just have a go. I mean, I've nothing to lose. I've lost everything. Having gone through all what he's gone through, who can blame such a father for doubting? He had come to a point where he had just to try anything. And he gives Jesus that opportunity. Just try. I want you to notice how Jesus responded when this happened. Because he did not actually scold him for not believing. Jesus' response was immediate. He said, everything is possible to him who believes. If I can, everything is possible to those who believe. The healing the father desperately needed was hanging on his own belief. I mean, will he believe? Can he believe? From his heart comes the truth. And he said, yes, I believe. Please help my unbelief. Notice three positive things here. He admitted his need. He admitted that need to the right person. And he asked for the help that he needed. At the right time, to the right person. Now here is faith deeply intermingled with doubt. And yet, Jesus performs the miracle anyway. And evidently, the faith mattered no more than his doubt. It doesn't matter how much doubt you have, so long as you have that little faith. God can still work with that little amount of faith. No wonder he said, if you have faith as little as mustard seed, you can move mountains. He's not worried about your doubts. He just wants you to have that little amount of faith. And then you can build on that little faith to do things. So the father realized, yes, I need to believe. Please help my unbelief. And Jesus worked on that faith and healed the boy. Here's another person, John the Baptist. Do you recall the occasion when Herod threw John the Baptist into jail? Because he dared to rebuke him and question him about his sexual sin with his brother's wife. confused and frustrated by this incarceration in the prison, John sends messages to Jesus with a very pertinent question. Go and ask him, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect another one? John is in prison, surrounded by the walls of prison. He is doubting whether all what he has been talking about is true or not. He's beginning even to doubt himself, because his mission was to prepare a way for the Messiah. And now Jesus is out there doing things, and John is in prison. Perhaps he's thinking, couldn't he actually do something about me when I'm here? But he's doubting even many other things. And so he sends people, go and ask him, are you the one we're waiting for? Or can we continue waiting for somebody else? That's in Matthew chapter 11, verse 2 and 3. In order to understand this, we need to keep two things in mind. First, John had made one of the earliest, clearest public confession of Jesus when he cried out, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." He publicly declared to everybody that Jesus is the one. He said it. And then he said in verse 34 of John chapter 1, I have seen and I testify that this is the Son of God. Make no mistake, John knew who Jesus was. He knew about him very well, but he's still doubting. Ask him whether he is the one, or is there another one to come? Well, he at least knew enough to ask the right question. Are you the one sent from heaven? Or is there someone else who is the Savior? Are you really the promised Messiah? See, the circumstances may change, but the question is the same for you and for me today, and to all the generations. Jesus, are you the one, or should I look elsewhere? And the doubts still come. Jesus, are you the one who say you are? Or should I listen to what other people are saying out there? The answer our Lord gives is very instructive. He does not rebuke John. He does not put him down. He simply gives John the evidence he needs in order to regain his faith. And he says to the messengers, go back and tell John what you have seen. And he lists down 6 miracles. Go and tell him the blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have the gospel preached to them, just like the prophecy had said about me. Go tell him what you have seen. And perhaps that will help him to rebuild his faith. Note what he didn't say. Jesus didn't say, go tell John that I am the fulfillment of the messianic promises of the Old Testament. Well, that is true, but he didn't say that. Or tell John that I can walk on water. That's true still, but he didn't say it. Or go and tell John, I make Pharisees look fools when we debate. He could have said that, but he didn't. Jesus essentially says, go back and tell John that in my name, the hurting people of this world are being totally transformed. That's what John needs to know at this time when he's suffering in the prison. Go and tell him what you have seen. And as those messengers stand to go, Jesus starts to speak about John. And he praised him by calling him more than a prophet. And he says in verse 9, among those born by women, there has not risen anyone greater than John. In other words, John is not just an ordinary person. What accommodation by Jesus? Just remember when it was given. Jesus spoke those words when John the Baptist was still nursing his doubts in the prison. And he says, he is the greatest of all men born by women. It's as if Jesus is saying, John may doubt me, but I never doubt him. He's still my man, doubts and all. What an incredible affirmation. And he's saying the same about you and me. You may doubt me, but I never doubt you. You're still my child. And I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild your faith in me. I got a third person that had some doubts. I mean, it's impossible to talk about doubt without considering this man whose name is synonymous with doubt. Probably know who I'm talking about now. The doubting Thomas. Well, in order to understand this story correctly, we need to know some facts about Thomas. Because we know him as a doubter. But is that really all what he is? Doubting Thomas? Maybe not. To start with, he possessed enormous courage. He was a courageous man. Thomas steps first into stage of biblical history in John chapter 11, when Lazarus of Bethany had died. Bethany was a small suburb of Jerusalem. And Jesus and his disciples had traveled to Jericho. And while they were there, Lazarus, back in Bethany, died. And the message came to Jesus, your friend Lazarus is dead. And he's telling his disciples, Lazarus is asleep. I'm going to wake him up. And they think he's asleep. So they're saying, if he's asleep, we'll wake up. And Jesus clearly notices they don't even understand what he's saying. I mean, Lazarus is dead. Oh, you see? So we need to go back to Bethany. And the disciples reminded him, hey, going back to Bethany? Didn't they want to stone you when you were there last time? Jesus, you must be joking. Really? You want us to go back to Bethany? Well. That's not right. But Jesus was determined. He said, we're going back. And if you want to come, you can come with me. I don't know if he said that, but that's what I'm thinking. He was determined to go. And Thomas is the one who opened his mouth. And he said, let us also go, that we may die with him. He realized going to Bethany meant death. But he was ready to go and die with him. I mean, that is not somebody who doubts about his faith. That is somebody who believes and has strong faith about whom he believes in. It would be suicidal to go back. But Jesus decides to go anyway. And Thomas is ready to go and die with him. It's a very brief statement for Thomas to say that. But it reveals enormous courage about him. See, it takes a real man to say that. If they kill him, they'll have to kill me too. And that's what Thomas was saying. See, there's love there. There's loyalty. There's also despair. There's sacrifice, and there's total commitment. It may just be that Thomas understood better than any of the other disciples what was about to happen. And that's why he needed to be totally convinced about what he believes. Something else about Thomas. He did not accept easy answers. Doesn't take things for granted. He wants to scrutinize and probe and get the real stuff. John's Gospel mentions Thomas one other time before the crucifixion. On that late Thursday when they were having their last meal in the upper room, and Jesus washed their disciples' feet and gave them this great command about loving one another. And then Judas leaves to go and do his dirty business. And the rest of the disciples were crowding around Jesus, knowing for sure the end is not far away. Those loyal men who had stood there with him in that hour of trial included Thomas. And then Jesus started talking to them. And he said to them in John chapter 14, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in the Father, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I got to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come back for you. So that where I am, you may also be. Where I go, you know, and the way you know." And at that point, I'm thinking it's in John chapter 14. If you read from verse 1 to 4, the whole of that story and beyond that. Thomas was there listening quietly, intently, carefully. And all this talk about coming and going was getting too much for him. It seems very vague and mysterious. And in a moment of great honesty, he blurts out and said, "Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can you expect us even to know the way? We don't know." And I believe all the other disciples were thinking the same. But only Thomas dared enough to question Jesus on it. They were as well perplexed, just like him. Well, that's Thomas. And that's second key of his personality. He was an independent thinker, a thoughtful man, not easily pushed down or stampeded. He won't make a confession of faith unless he deeply believed that to be true. Let others have their simple grip of faith that comes without reflection and deep thought, but not Thomas. His was a faith that's been won through agony and personal struggle, and is prepared to go to any depth to verify what he believes. Number 3, he was fully devoted to Christ. Fully. I mean, he was with Jesus during all the tumult of the last few days of his life. He was with him in the triumphal entry. He was with Jesus when he was debating the Pharisees. He was with Jesus in the upper room. He was with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, the picture we see of Thomas here on the evening of the crucifixion is that he's a brave man, intensely loyal and deeply committed to Jesus. And if need be, he's ready to lay down his own life. He's completely honest about his doubts, confusion, and fears, and he will not be satisfied with a second-hand answer. He is ready to question everything so that he can strengthen his own faith. He's not afraid to display his doubts if it's going to help him to build his faith. John tells us that Thomas was not present on that Sunday evening when Jesus suddenly appeared to their midst after resurrection. They were all there, but Thomas was not there. And Jesus appeared to them after he resurrected. And the Bible doesn't say why Thomas was not there, but I think I might guess. There are basically two different ways that people respond to sorrow and tragedy. Some people seek solace in company of others, while others prefer to be alone in their own thoughts. And I think probably that is what Thomas was, sulking by himself, that all what I had given to Jesus, and it's gone. If it is true about Thomas, then he realized more than others that what happened in Jerusalem was really something very significant in his life and his faith. Might be true, therefore, that he hurted more than the others, probably. So, everything he had given to Jesus. And Jesus had died. But he still loves, he still cares, and he still wants to believe. But his heart is broken. He's not a bad man, nor is his doubt sinful. Deep inside, he wants to believe. He wants to believe. Thomas is definitely not a skeptic. His doubts come from devotion to Christ. He's a wounded believer. He was not unwilling to believe. He was only unable to believe. And that's why when the evidence was presented before him later, he more than believed. Desperately wanted to believe, if only he could be sure. Because after all this was happening, 8 days later, Jesus appeared to them again. And this time, Thomas was there. And Jesus seems to be speaking to him directly as one whose faith is weak. Not as one who doesn't have faith, but as the one who has small faith. And he said to him, "Put your finger here on my lips where the spear went. Put your fingers here on my hands also. Stop doubting, Thomas, and believe. Reach out to me." It's worth noting, actually, that Jesus knew all about Thomas' doubts. He knew the raging sea within his heart. And he came just so Thomas could be sure. See, Jesus didn't put him down. He just said, "Go ahead. See for yourself. Stop doubting. Here's the evidence." Just like he's saying today, "Come. Let's reason together. My office is open door. Come. Thomas, come over. See the evidence." And he's addressing your doubt today and mine. Come. Let's reason together. Come and see it. This means today, maybe in the front door out there, we should be having this two-word sign saying, "Doubters, welcome." If you have doubts, that's the message we should be telling people. That should be our church's message, that this is a church of doubters. If you have doubts, come inside. If you have questions, come inside. If you are uncertain, come inside. If you're skeptic, just come in. If you're searching for truth, come inside. That's what we should be saying, because that's God's policy. It should not be really stuck there thinking that we have reached. We should be questioning our faith in order to build our faith even stronger. Well, as far as I can tell, and there's no evidence about this, Thomas never actually touched Jesus. It seems that simply by seeing him face to face completely convinced him. And therefore, do the strongest doubters often become the strongest believers? When he sees Jesus, he raises to the highest level of faith in the Gospel of John, and he cried out and said, "My Lord and my God." John chapter 20, verse 28. That's Thomas. And we call him Doubting Thomas. Well, he was a man of faith. See, doubt does have its uses. It's often a prelude to an even deeper faith. I love, sometimes when we think about it that way. It's a wonderful truth that the greatest doubters often become the strongest believers. And the honest doubts, once resolved, often become the bedrock and foundation of unshakable faith. I've listened to some people who never believed in God at all before. One of them was an Oxford professor called C.S. Lewis, was an atheist. Turned out to be a very strong Christian. Has written many books about God. Another one is Professor Faith from South Africa, who was an atheist, but now preaches the Adventist message, the gospel of Jesus. Doubts can be catalyst for faith if you honestly address them. It has been said that no truth is so strongly believed as that which was once doubted. Something that was once doubted, once it is believed, you believe it strongly, more than anything else before. Now, as I finish up on this, come with me as we talk about some things that we might do to help us move from our doubts towards faith. Doubt is not sinful, remember that? And it helps us to get some spiritual growth. It's what you do with your doubt that matters. And here are some simple things that we might do that might help us to understand and help us even to get to where we need to go, from doubt to faith. First thing I want us to think about, admit your doubt and ask for help. That's what the father of that son did in Mark chapter 9. That's what John the Baptist did. He admitted he was doubtful. And in a way, that's what Thomas did. He plainly stated why he could not And he would not believe until he saw the evidence himself. See, God is not fragile. He can handle your doubts, your fears, your worries, and all the unanswered questions. We serve a very big God. He runs the whole universe without any help. So your doubts won't upset him. He's not worried about it. Just tell him your doubts and cry out. Don't fight the battle alone. Go to him. Something else we can do. Recognize that faith is a choice. It's not a feeling. It's a choice you make to believe. It took me a long time to figure that out. It's easy to feel like you've got a lot of faith when things are going well. And you believe and trust God when everything is okay. I mean, you've got all the money that you need in the bank. Your wife loves you. Your doctor says you don't have cancer. Your children are doing well and they're not into drugs. Your career is moving ahead. You are happy. Your church and all is right in the world. You can believe so easily because you're feeling good about it. But what will happen when you run out of money? When your marriage breaks apart? When you end up with cancer? When your children get into problems? When you lose your job? When friends at church won't talk to you? Your family leaves you? And the life in general stinks and is disintegrating around you? I mean, if all you got is a God of good times, then your faith is very shallow indeed. It's got to be God of good times, but also God of bad times. That's faith. See, I don't have all the answers to the world, but I have learned that faith is a choice that you make. Sometimes you choose to believe because of what you see. Other times you believe in spite of what you see. And still your faith remains strong. I truly have no other choice. Remain confident that God can do everything that he says he will. Something else we might do. Don't be afraid to borrow some faith. Borrow some faith from somebody who has it. And there are many heroes of faith that walk around us. You can hang around somebody who is much stronger faith than you. Borrow some faith. I've borrowed faith all my life. That's why I'm talking about it. I've listened to people. My mother, when I was growing up, was a very faithful woman and taught me how to trust in God. I'm not saying that I always believed, but sometimes when I feel very low, I remember that she encouraged me. But there are some other people in my life, my heroes of faith, that I might talk about later on, and I will mention later on after this, who have made my life and my faith strong. I'll call them my heroes of faith. Now, there's something else I've just put up there. Act on your faith, not your doubt. Act on your faith. There are people who dwell on their doubts a little bit more than their own faith. And when that happens, you might find yourself actually in problems because you are dwelling on the negatives other than the positives. Act on your faith. That's what Noah did when he built the ark. I mean, there was no rain. There was no evidence of rain anywhere. He couldn't see anything, but he believed and did it. Faith, not sight. That's what Abraham did when God asked him to leave his familiar territory in Ur of Chaldeans to go to Canaan. That's what Abraham did when God asked him to offer Isaac. That's what Moses did when he marched through the sea on a ground, dry ground. That's what David did when he met Goliath. That's what Joshua did when he marched around Jericho. That's what Daniel did in the lion's den. That's what Nehemiah did when he was rebuilding the wall. Acting on your faith. That's what God is asking you to do. Act on your faith, not on your doubts. Don't you ever think that these people didn't have doubt? They did. Of course they did. They didn't know in advance what would happen, but they took a deep breath, decided to trust God, and they acted on their faith, not their doubts. Do the same today, and your faith will continually grow stronger. Doubt your doubts, not your faith. If you're going to have any doubts, doubt your doubts. Don't doubt your faith. This simply means that you should not cast away your faith simply because you are in a deep valley of darkness. All of us walking to this valley from time to time. You're not alone. But some of us, unfortunately, spend a great deal of time in there sulking and thinking, I'm fallen here and I'm here, and without thinking that there's something better out there. But when you find yourself in that valley where all uncertain and you are sorely tempted to give up, doubts, fears, and worries, remember these two words: keep walking. Just keep walking. Nothing is gained by camping in that valley of darkness. The only way out is just to keep walking. And remember to doubt your doubts, not your faith. And as we finish up, this one here, understand that there are some things you will never understand on this side of heaven. There are things you will never know so long as we live on this planet. And so don't assume that things that you don't know will bring you down or will shake your faith. All of us question that we got questions we don't normally get answers to. And this question always, or most often, revolve around the whys of this earth, like, why did it happen to me, or my children, or to my wife, or to my husband, or why now and not some time later? I mean, do all these questions come to our hearts, and the answers will not come until we get to heaven. We don't have the answers to those questions. It is a faith-building statement to say, I understand that I won't understand right now. That's a faith-building statement. I understand that I will not understand. Because there are things that we will never, ever understand. And the last one, oh, did I say the last one? Focus on what you know to be true. Keep going back to that which you know to be true. Because after considering the sufferings of this life, the perils and tribulations that he went through, Paul concludes in the book of Romans triumphantly by declaring, "For I am persuaded," and goes on to say a little bit more about who he's persuaded about. And he declares that nothing in the whole of this universe can separate us from what? From the love of God. That's what he knew. And then he says to Timothy, "I know whom I believe." In Timothy chapter 1 verse 12. "For I know whom I've believed." Paul is focusing on what he knows to be true. In times of trouble, keep going back to what you know to be true. My heroes of faith I mentioned earlier on includes these two. I don't know if you know those two. Nobody know them? Yes, these are my children. They have helped me to build my faith. I mean, they trust me to do things for them. And they trust me completely. I tell them this is where we are going and they follow. This is what we are eating and they eat. This is where we live and they just go in. Get into my car and they go in. Total commitment and trust. I mean, I've learned a lot about faith by observing these two in my life. They're my heroes of faith. At one time I told them, we're moving to Australia. Jump in the plane, let's go. And they followed me. And here we are. They sat there listening to me reading stories to them when they were young. And they believed those stories. And they built some trust in me. They have taught me a lot, probably more than I have taught them. I wonder if they know that. I'm still learning from them, even now. One of them, who came first, was a very strong-willed young boy when he was growing. And he questioned everything. He was more like Thomas. He didn't believe things without really testing. And you tell him things, and he was very questioning. And he could just think things out of ordinary. And I remember one time I was walking with him in the street of Reading. We used to live in the UK then. And we were walking with him, and I was holding his hand. I may have shared this story with you before. And he looked to me and said, "Dad, do all these people know where they're going?" And we stood, we were just about to cross the road. They were all people. "Do all these people know where they're going?" And I was holding his hand as he was looking up. And I said, "Son, yes, they know where they're going." That is not the actual place, but we were walking with him like that. And he said to me something that I'll never forget. And he said, "Dad, when I grow up, I'll know where I'm going." And those words keep, recycling in me. That he doubted, but he also believed. He was doubting. Do they actually know? I doubt whether they know where they're going, these people. I'm not sure whether they know where they're going. But I know if they do, I think I also have faith I will be like them at one point. And I remember those things. And I kept them in my heart. That faith, even when they trusted me wholly, involved some doubts also. That they were doubting, but they also believed. And then a few years later, came this one. And she was charming. She was a lovely girl who did not talk much or question much, but very strong-willed. She goes in to do what she believes is the right thing to do. Whether you believe her or not, she'll go and do it. She doesn't argue much, but what she believes, she goes for it. That's her even up to today. There's some things I even talk to her today, say, but how did you even do that without even consulting us? Well, that's what I think is true. So I go for it, and I do it. That was her. And from the beginning, I could see her collecting things when we go for shopping, boxes and things for her art when she was 2 years old. And she's concerned about building her art. That was her. And then something happened when she was around 2 or 3 years old. She had not gone to school yet. But being a daughter of a teacher, she had learned some things a little bit earlier. And she had learned how to write her name. And she started writing her name everywhere in the house. On the carpet, on the chairs, on the walls, everywhere. Her name was everywhere. And I said to her, no, you can't do that. You can't do it. That's not right. But she was confident about it. So she sulked a bit and sat there and said to me something, again, I'll never forget. She said to me, I will fly away to the moon and I'll write my name there. Well, that was a strong statement. I don't know whether she's there yet, but probably she's still on her way. But what I'm saying is, she doubted whether I really understood what that meant to her, the name. I mean, if she could ask me, probably she would be saying, Dad, do you really understand what this means to me? I doubt whether you know. But you really don't understand what my name means. It means that I can even go out of this earth and go and write it somewhere else. Doubt and belief going together. We encourage each other quite a bit. And that is true. That's why I said borrowing faith from others. And I said it is time for youth, young people, all of us, to think about not just what we believe, but even sometimes focus on doubts that we have. There's a young man that is one of the orphans we support back in Kenya. You remember we had a fundraising here recently? And one of the young people we support, he's in college. He's a very needy child. He's actually now an adult. And he was abandoned by his parents. He lived in the streets, and he was pushed by drug dealers almost, and he ran away from the streets again. And then he came and listened to people preaching, and he accepted the message, and now he's an Adventist. And that boy, we are supporting him in college. Just as we finish, this boy talked to me. I'll talk to you a little bit more about him in a message that I received from him this week, on Sunday actually. And he sent me a message. Occasionally he talked to me and said, when you were in your youth, who or what made you keep on going? Just share with me kindly. Sometimes he goes down and calls me, send me a message. Who encourages you when you were young? Who kept you going? Comes to a point where he's feeling the doubts and he wants to get it done. And I said to him about my mom, and he said to me, personally, I've always survived alone. I've grown up without knowing what is fatherly love or motherly love. As the time goes by, I have tried to approach them, but efforts bore no fruits. Instead, my mom told me, I'm no longer a child, and kila mtu ashughulike na maisha yake. That means just go and fend for yourself. These words really broke my heart. The only thing which makes me to keep going, I can only say, when I think of how far I've come from, it really encourages me to keep on surviving, striving. Though loneliness kills me sometimes. If not you being there for me, hata sijui. That means I don't even know where I'll be. So this is a case of a desperate young person who represents many other young people who go through life with doubts. Am I in the right place? Where am I going? Who needs another person to encourage along the way. Got to bring it to an end. But as we finish, just remember this. If you find yourself in a place where, no, I will not even talk about that now. I talk about this one here. Just say those words. Find yourself doubting. Just say like that father of that child. I do believe. Help my unbelief. And be prepared for the answer, because God will never ignore that kind of prayer. God bless you.